Hi everyone, my name is Chelsea. Welcome to Little Mountain Ranch. If you have watched my last couple of videos, you may be thinking to yourself, does she wear the same thing every single day? And the reality is that this time of year I kind of do. My overalls, which have seen better days, are pretty much my uniform throughout the summer when I am working outside. And then this time of year where it is pretty warm out, but still a little bit chilly, you can often find me in one of these Simply Merino sweaters. It's merino wool, but it's very thin, so it breathes really well and everything. I have a few different colors, but anyway, yes, I do pretty much wear the same thing all summer long. But that is not what I'm here to talk to you about. What I am here to talk to you about today, or share with you rather, is what I am doing to amend my beds this year. I shared with you last year, I think towards the end of the year, that I decided that I wasn't going to put compost on my bed. So what I normally do every year is I take some compost that we make here with our cow manure, our horse manure, and then the hay that they waste, and we mix it all together, turn that over until it turns into a really nice compost. And we do that twice a year, once in the spring and once in the fall. But last year there were a couple of things that I noticed with my plants that indicated to me that maybe there was a bit too much nitrogen in the soil. One of those were my carrots. I had really wild, wacky carrots. And actually it was a couple of you that had left comments saying that potentially it was a nitrogen overdose basically on the seedlings, and they were basically on plant steroids. And I did some research on that, and that is one of the signs of too much nitrogen in your soil. So I decided that I wasn't going to do that again this year. So I didn't do it in the fall, and I wasn't going to do it in the spring, and I was just going to give my soil an opportunity to rest and not have a bunch of new nutrients in it, because I had, I guess, done a really good job at making sure that we had lots of nutrients in the soil. However, when Dan was doing our compost this year and scraping our big piles of manure that we had collected up over the winter into our nice big pile that we're going to compost over the summer, he found some really beautiful, really well rotted compost that is basically at the stage of soil, and we'll head over there and check that out in just a second. And it's basically just the richest soil that you could ever want. I have decided that I am going to add that to my beds this year. It shouldn't be too high in nitrogen because it has so well broken down at this point that it's basically just like really rich soil. So I think it'll be okay. But one of my other motivations for doing that, we're going to talk about this bed that you can see behind me here in a second, but is the fact that, where would be an example? We've actually done most of the beds already, but here's actually an example, because this bed hasn't been done yet, and you can see that it's almost at the same level as the ground is itself, whereas these beds over here, which have already had the new soil added to them, are nice and mounded. This is my preferred way of gardening, these nice mounded, sort of semi-raised in-ground beds. I have been gardening like this forever, and I really love it for a lot of reasons, which I'll get into a little bit later on. But gardening this way, the ground does settle over time, and eventually it just kind of all becomes one level, and I really like them mounded like that. One of the reasons I like them mounded is because the beds have good drainage that way, and if we end up with a massive deluge of water, the water tends to go down into the pathways instead of sitting in the beds, and the beds don't end up getting really waterlogged. Also a little bit easier to work on because they're raised above the ground a little bit, which I really like. And it also kind of keeps the beds delineated a little bit, separated out from the pathways themselves. One of the other things that I do, because somebody had asked me in one of my previous videos why I don't use landscape fabric or something in my pathways. And the reason for that is because I actually really love having lawn in my pathways. Now that might seem kind of confusing because I've talked about wanting to keep the grass out of my garden and how I use landscape fabric along the edges of my garden to keep the grass out. This is a different kind of grass than grows around the outside of my garden. That is quack grass, and it has rhizomes, which I'll show you what a rhizome looks like. This is a rhizome here. So it's basically a long, fat root that can work its way through the toughest of soils over fairly long distance and then shoot up another grass. It also starts to grow grass out of different areas of it. So as this is going along, there's grass and grass and grass and grass, and it's very difficult to get out. Whereas the grass that's in the pathways, I've actually planted this grass using grasses that don't spread all over the place and aren't invasive like this grass here, which is the bane of my existence. And I love the way that it looks in the summertime. It is beautiful with the grass pathways, and it's super easy to maintain because I just run my mower down it when the grass starts getting long, and I love it. So that's why I have grass pathways. Okay, so we're back to the bed that we started at, and you can see that piece of weed barrier that's over there. That was over top of this bed, and I've had it over top of this bed for the last 2 years, and that is to stop the quack grass that's growing along the side from getting in my garden. Oh, there's Simon here to visit us out in the garden. That's one of my garden cats. There, you stay out of my greenhouse. He has taken to going in and trying to use underneath the shelves of my greenhouse as a litter box. Hang on, I'm just gonna go get him out of there. Oh, young man. Go greenhouse litter box for you. So anyway, sorry about that. So that was over top of this bed for the last 2 years to stop the quack grass from kind of getting into the main garden itself, which was working really well until I pulled it back and I realized that the quack grass, you can see, is starting to get in underneath the side of that. So my plan here is I'm going to go along with the shovel and dig out all the quack grass that's in this bed. And then, because this bed has been covered for the last couple of years and hasn't been getting any amendments, I'm going to amend this bed with that really beautiful soil that I'll show you in a second. Just give this soil a little bit of a boost. I'm going to cover it back up with the weed barrier again, and then I'll be planting probably zucchini and bush varieties of squash in along here. I did that last year and it looked really pretty. I'll probably put some flowers in here as well. Oh, okay. Dan just came down. He is up doing some fencing right now up in our upper field, and he just grabbed something. Actually, do you want to go up and just quickly check out what he's doing before we get into this project? Let's do it. Okie dokie. Let me show you what he's been up to. Getting this whole area cleared of all the stumps. Putting in a gate way up there. All these fence posts all the way along here. And they wrap all the way around down that way. And I am so thrilled with it. I've said this before, but I have a thing for fences. I just love fences. I enjoy fencing, but I just love when an area is fenced. Don't know what that's about. But anyway, I want to show you this. So do you remember last year where we found a spring right up that away? So we've dug a channel down for the water to run. And then Dan put a culvert, so the water is running down right here. It's not a ton of water. And it runs down here under this culvert. And then out this way. And we're gonna put a little pond right down here. The water actually goes down and then goes back in the ground and then out and comes out way over that way into a creek. But we'd love to create just a small pond right here to be able to water our livestock that are going to be up in this area. The reason that we're working so hard to get this fence done right now is so that we can get our cows off our hayfield. They should have been off the hayfield about 2 weeks ago, so that we can grow our hay and they're not eating all of our hay. All right, Dan has to stay up here. Oh, you're just gonna take the dozer down? Okay, so I'm just gonna take the truck down and get back to the garden. All right, first thing we need to do is go through and dig out all this grass. The good news is that the top of this soil is a bit deceiving because underneath it actually looks pretty good and there's lots of worms in there. So that's great news. I do a no-till garden, which basically means I don't run my rototiller through my garden. If you have been with me for a while, then you do know that a couple of years ago, I got fed up with it and I ran my tiller through it, but I am very much back to a no-till garden, which means that my garden basically maintains its same configuration every year, and I build up the soil rather than tilling in the soil. There are a bunch of advantages to this. The biggest one being that all of the microbes and the bacteria and the fungi and all that kind of stuff that is in the soil gets killed. Well, not all of it, but a lot of it gets killed when you till it. And when you first till it, all of that dying life actually does give your plants a quick boost and an infusion of nutrients, but over time it actually depletes them extremely. So this is just the way that I garden. I find that my plants are healthiest when I garden this way, and in the end it's actually a lot less work. One of the reasons why people like to till their garden, and this is the reason that I did a few years ago, is that when the grass kind of gets carried away or the weeds start getting carried away, it seems a lot easier just to till that all in, kind of out of sight, out of mind. But the problem with that is it's not actually out of mind. No, that analogy is not going to work. What I mean is that when you till all that in, you actually till the seeds into your garden, but also there are a bajillion weed seeds in this soil. And every time I till it up, I bring weed seeds that are down in the soil way too deep to actually germinate up to the surface of the soil, and then those seeds germinate and the weeds grow. So the idea with a no-tilled garden is if you stay on top of the weeding, that eventually you'll get on top of it and you won't end up with as many weeds as you do in a garden that you till all the time. I haven't really practiced this for long enough to see if that is really true, although last year was definitely better than any year that we've ever had as far as weeding goes. But I also have a lot more time now to be able to spend out in the garden weeding, and I actually really enjoy weeding, so maybe that's the reason we didn't have so many weeds. Needless to say, the long and short of it is this is just the way that I choose to garden, and it works for me. So I'm obviously disrupting the soil with what I'm doing with the shovel right now, digging everything up, but I'm not being as aggressive with it as I would be if I had a rototiller in here. Oh, here's a better example of rhizome. See that beastly thing? And one of the other lovely things about a rhizome is that when you cut it, and you have a little piece like, oh, it's very tough, like this, that can grow a grass. So you do want to make sure that when you're pulling it out of your soil that you get the whole entire root. And sometimes the roots can go on and on and on for up to 6 feet. So you do need to follow them and get the whole entire thing out. I'm not like as concerned about doing that in this case, although I probably should be. It'll save me trouble in the future. But because I'm going to have them covered up again with the landscape fabric, it's not as big of a deal, but still. I am so happy with the way that this soil looks underneath here, my friends. So much better than I thought. So now comes the tedious part of going through here by hand and pulling out all this grass, as many of the rhizomes as I can get. So when it comes to covering this with our compost, we are going to get some help to do that, because that's a lot of wheelbarrowing. And we'll get this all covered up, and then I'll show you when it's done how nice it's going to look, and then we'll cover it back up again, and it will be very happy and grow us some beautiful food in a few months' time. So many little wormies in here. That makes me very happy. Ready for compost. Here is our pile of very well rotted compost. As you can see, it is just gorgeous soil, and there's pretty much nothing identifiable left in there, hay, manure, or anything like that. That's what you're looking for with very well composted compost. This is the opposite of that. This is what this began as. This is all, as you can see, lots of hay, lots of manure, the odd squash in there, pumpkin. By this time next year, this pile here will look just like this pile here. This is a gardener's gold mine. All right, friends, the next thing that we need to deal with is this bed here. So I was sharing the other day that I had planted mint just down below this bed many years ago. I put this bed here thinking that the bed itself, along with all of the soil, would stop the mint from getting into it. That was, of course, a very ignorant assumption because mint can be very invasive. Actually, it's invasive in this bed. It's kind of spread around a little bit, but not really, not too bad. But it loves the light, fluffy soil of this bed. So I need to deal with it because I want this bed to stay here. I really like the way it looks. I like where it's positioned here in front of the greenhouse, curved around the little flower bed that's in there. I just think it looks really pretty. But we have to get the mint out of here. The other problem I have is that some of the herbs, this oregano here being one of them that I planted in this bed, actually came back this year, which really surprises me because things don't usually overwinter very well in raised beds in our climate. And then if you can look over here, these little babies here are chamomile, little baby chamomiles here. So I'm going to try to pull some of these out because the chamomile that I planted in the house, or in the greenhouse, didn't actually germinate. So I'm going to save some of these little chamomile babies and we will plant that along this edge of the bed again because it looked really pretty. We have this little lavender. Now, I have never heard of lavender overwintering in a zone 3B before, but this is soft growth here and it looks to me like there's potentially new growth happening in there, which would be just wild. So I would definitely want to save that. Do we have anything else that made it through? This one's looking kind of dead. I can't remember what this was. I think this was oregano too. Whenever I look for life in plants in the spring, I always think of Mary from The Secret Garden, one of my favorite books from my childhood, which explains a lot. But in the garden, when Mary and Dickon find the secret garden and they go in and she's looking around to find life in this old dead garden, and Dickon says to her, uses the word wick to describe life, showing life in something. And I always think about that whenever I look for life in the spring. These ones are thyme right here, and I don't think there's any life. There's lots of weeds coming out of here. I don't smell any thymy smell in that. But this one for sure has life. Look at that. So I'm gonna go grab a pot to put this in. This one here is sage, and I have had sage overwinter before. Let's look. I feel like there might be some life in here yet. Look, can you guys see? I don't know if you can see, there's a little tiny green leaf right there. Can you see it? That's very exciting. I'll just cut all this back here. There's definitely some green life in there. Look at that. So that's exciting. Okay, so we're gonna have sage too, and sage is another one that didn't germinate for me this year. Fabulous. So once we get this bed all cleaned out, I plan on putting these herbs back in again. Ooh, there's mint right there. See this guy here. Really don't feel like that's got any life in it. It's looking pretty dead. Nothing green in there. This little lavender though, wouldn't that be wild if that made it through? I would be so thrilled. Mint also grows via rhizomes, so it gets in everywhere. Man, this would be so cool if this actually was alive. Wild. This was one that I started from seed last year. Guess we'll see. Oh my goodness, this soil is so full of mint. So here's my plan. I am going to take this out, dig all the soil out, go through all the soil, remove all the rhizomes from said soil. You know, I'm reconsidering this. Wherever I put this soil, mint is going to grow. So I kind of have to be careful about it. If I do want to dispose of the soil, I need to make sure that I dispose of it somewhere that I don't care if the mint grows, or somewhere that's just inhospitable to mint growing and spreading everywhere. Because I'm thinking that it might just not be, take all my little garden guys out of here. It might not be worth my time, and it might make all this work for naught if I end up missing some of the rhizomes and then I just infest the bed again. My camera battery died while I was in the middle of clearing out the bed over there, and then I ended up getting onto some other things. So we are now on to the second day, and I am going to get this bed emptied out and make a decision about whether I want to repurpose this soil, which I'm kind of leaning towards not repurposing at this point. We were talking about where we could put this soil, where we could safely have mint be. And we actually think that potentially around the chicken coop would be a good option, because it wouldn't be able to spread very far in that area. And even if it did within the chicken coop, that would be fine. So that's what I'm leaning towards right now. But what I need to do right now is get all of this soil actually taken out of this bed. So my plan at this point is to empty all the soil out, put some weed barrier down, and then something like maybe some sand, or yeah, probably sand. That might really work well. Something that's like fairly heavy down on top of that, and then my soil on top of that. And hopefully that will stop this invasive mint situation that I have going on. But only time will tell. At least the soil in here is nice and light, so it's not going to be too bad to empty out. I'll be back with you when I'm done, and we'll get this bed moved and see what we're dealing with underneath. I have a feeling it's going to be mint mania, because the amount of mint rhizomes that are in this bed are crazy. I may come to regret this choice in the future, but all of the dirt from in here is in a pile over there on the other side of the forest garden, where I throw just odds and ends that I am too lazy to take elsewhere out of my garden. So I threw it over in that corner. And even if it's spread over there, there's really nowhere that it can cause any harm. So that was a lot easier to take it that way than all the way up this way and around to the greenhouse. So that's the way it's gonna be. So this is what we got in here. And you can see, look at these rhizomes. Oh my goodness. So I guess the question is, do I lift this up and put the weed barrier in and then have it sticking out the side? That of course makes the most sense, right? But I don't want it sticking out of the side because I don't want to see it. I'm actually not a huge fan of weed barrier, although that might be hard to believe with the amount of it that I currently have in my garden, but I don't love it. I've grown to not hate it the way that I used to, because I can see its benefits and how helpful it's been to suppress the quackgrass in my garden, but I don't want to look at it, and I don't want it sticking out the bottom of this. Although, hey little bug, or although in order for the mint to not kind of crawl in underneath, I guess I have to do that. I don't want to. Let's see if we can lift this up here. Still might be too much dirt in the bottom. Oh no, there we go. That's lifting out. This is a sprout box garden bed, and this is a BC company, which you guys know I love to support. I don't have a code or anything for them, but you can look them up online if you want to go check them out. Pull this down this way. So that you can see what it looks like without it there. I actually don't mind it without it there either, but it does look really cute with it there. So definitely want to keep it. This year I would like to fill it with petunias. So I know I mentioned when I was taking the herbs out of there that I wanted to put the herbs back in there, but I'm actually thinking I might want to put my herbs in pots and then keep them in the greenhouse over the winter so that I can hopefully overwinter them again. Yeah, I think I want to fill this full of multicolored petunias this year. That's what I'm leaning towards at the moment. But first things first, we got to deal with this insane amount of mint that is in here. It's not really as bad as I thought it was going to be. There was a ton of mint in the soil that I took out of here, but the amount of rhizomes in this is not actually that bad. What I think happened, because I had the mint planted over here, is I think it came in underneath the side of this and then just came up that way and didn't actually go kind of all the way in through this way and then up in there, if that makes any sense at all. Anyway, okay, I'm going to get Dan to come and help me fill this because that is going to be a big job. I'm going to fill it with all of that fresh compost that I showed you over there. And then I will cut the edge of this and then cover the edge with dirt and plant some grass on it or something. I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do there. And then I am going to top this bed off as well, the other sprout box that I have on that side, with some of that compost too. And we should be good to go. So I'm happy to have this done. This was something I wanted to do last year and never got around to it. So as much as it was a pain, and my back is definitely sore now, I am glad to have it done. So I did end up putting 2 layers of the good quality weed barrier that I have that seems to be holding up really well. I've had it, I think I'm on to the 3rd year in a couple of areas of my garden using the same stuff, and it hasn't degraded at all. So I put a double layer of that underneath, and you can see the edge of it sticking out there. And I know I should have brought it out quite a bit further around the bed in order to stop any mint from getting in underneath this edge. But I didn't want to do that because, well, there's a couple of reasons. One, over on this side, you can see along this edge here, it's actually along the curve of my herb bed that's down here that also has some grass in it that I need to deal with. I will get to that. And so I just put it all the way around the edge, and I'm actually going to cover it up with soil so that you can't see it, because I don't like the way that it looks. The plan along the edge here is again to bring soil up all the way around, and then I'm just going to plant grass right up to the edge of it. And I think that should work, because I didn't actually have mint coming in from over here, and it never spread out this way. It came in from in behind the bed and then up through the bottom. So hopefully this will work, even if it only works for a few years. I'm happy with that. I haven't put the herbs back in here yet because I haven't decided if this is where I want them. I think I was mentioning before that I wanted to fill this with petunias. I love petunias, another flower that reminds me of my grandpa. I'll make that decision a little bit later on. In the meantime, I'm going to put those herbs that I pulled out of this bed into some pots, and then I'll decide what I want to do with them a little bit later on. I am really happy to have that done though, because I had planned on doing it last spring and never got around to it. So now it's done, the bed is ready, and I'm going to be able to plant in it, and that makes me very happy. All right, friends, that's going to be it for me today. And remember, if you would like to dig a little bit more deeply into how to start your own garden, how to preserve, how to cook from scratch, all the things that we talk about here on my channel, you can join us in our membership community, and I'll put a link for that down below this video. I hope you all have a fantastic day, and I'll see you again next time. Bye, everyone.